1700 years, people have been going to church, and they have been doing, well, actually, they've been going longer than that, but for 1700 years. They've been doing this one thing. They've come together on Sunday morning, be they Protestant or Catholic or Orthodox, and they have recited a creed. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible, the Nicene Creed, 325. If you were raised in a church that didn't particularly like the Nicene Creed, but still liked the Creed, you might have recited the Apostles' Creed, which dates back to 390. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. It's always been difficult to affirm belief in God, and there's always been pushback against belief in God, and there's been pushback in our generation as well. In fact, if you say today that I believe in God, people might say something like, well, that's very nice. I hope it's meaningful to you. Because something happened 400 years ago. About 400 years ago, two philosophers struggled with how could you get sure and certain knowledge, clear and distinct, as Descartes would call it. How could you get factual information? For Francis Bacon, who, by the way, is the son of a Puritan woman, that was found in empirical data. For Descartes, it was found in the realm of the mind. What both Descartes and Bacon did together was take religion from the realm of objective truth, push it into the realm of the mental, push it into the realm of the spiritual, push it into the realm of subjective truth. So today, in our thinking, scientific truth is far more important, far more valuable than subjective truth. And this subjective truth thing, as we began looking at God in the realm of mind, something happened over 400 years. God became more and more emaciated, emasculated. In fact, according to Nietzsche, he became irrelevant. If you read Friedrich Nietzsche's book, Thus Spake Zarathustra, Zarathustra comes down from the mountain and declares God is dead. Literally means God is no longer necessary. God is one of those irrelevant, unimportant things placed on the ash heap of history. You and I live in that context. It's the enlightenment, they tell us, frankly, from a spiritual point of view. We now may live in the period of the endarkenment. We're moving further and further away from the spiritual truth. But I want you to understand something today. I want you to understand that the announcement of God's death might be just a little premature. It may be that, like in, what is that, Princess Bride? He's only a little dead. He's only mostly dead, right? He's not all dead yet. And so I want us to go back to talking about God. I want to talk about theology proper. Now, this term nobody uses anymore. I'm sure Tim has in the church library someplace a systematic theology. And if it's an old systematic theology, right in the beginning of that book will be something called theology proper, the study of God. And the study of God was the very first thing, well, I was going to seminary or whatever, is the very first thing that you study. Why? Because if there's no God, there's no God's Word, right? If there's no God, there's no God's Son. If there's no God, there's no God's Spirit. If there's no God, there's no God's kingdom. I mean, obviously, the rest of the stuff makes very little sense at all if God doesn't exist. And so we start with theology proper, and I want to talk to you today about that. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And as soon as I say I believe, I recognize that the skeptics out there, you will have met these skeptics, say, oh, well, I hope it helps you. Poor little Christian that you are. Unable to cope with the Hobbesian world in which you live, a world which is nasty and brutish. You long for better things and a nicer place. You want God's help. You want God's comfort. And you want a little hope for the future. You need a crutch. Wait a second. Maybe the crutch isn't actually a Christian thing. Isn't it possible that a person who denies the existence of God does so because they can't cope with the harsh reality that there's really a God out there, and that this God out there created them and holds them accountable and responsible, and if he exists somewhere at some time, they're going to face him, and they will have to give an answer. The question is, who's really using the crutch? Of course, Christians will readily admit they need a crutch, right? I need a crutch. You need a crutch. And that's what Christianity is all about. We live in a broken world. We're broken people. We need a crutch. And God sent one. The name of the crutch is Jesus. But I'm not here to talk about Jesus today. We're here to talk about belief in God. Belief. I want you to understand today that everybody talks about belief. Belief is important. Belief is before all things. Before anyone knows anything, they believe something. They at least believe they can know, right? They might believe it's matter that they know, or spirit that they know, or matter and spirit that they know, or at the very least, they know that they doubt. That was Descartes. They believe something. So the question isn't whether we believe, the question is what we believe. Nobody can escape belief. So today I want to share with you initially 4 things that Christians believe about God. 4 fundamental beliefs about God, truths regarding the existence of God. The first one is this: God is before all things. All you have to do is read the first verse in the Bible. In the beginning, God. Or if you read the first verse of John's Gospel, which mimics Genesis, in the beginning, or more literally, whenever the beginning was, the Word already was. In other words, God is before everything. Before God, there was nothing. God exists before anything else. He pre-exists anything. Nothing coexists him. Nothing pre-exists him. Nothing exists before him. Nothing exists apart from him. And that leads us to the second truth about God. He not only is before all, he is creator of all. In the beginning, God created, Genesis 1:1, the heaven and the earth. But if you read Acts chapter 17, Paul says exactly the same kind of thing. He speaks about the God who made the world and everything that is in it. So there is nothing that precedes God. There's nothing that coexists with God. There is nothing that came into being without God. God is creator. And because he is creator, that leads to a third truth. You see, what he has created, he has authority over, he has ownership over, so that God is over all. Paul spells it out again, Acts chapter 17. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth. And if you were to read that Acts 17 passage, and we'll read more of it later, he not only brings things into being, he controls their history and their destiny as well. He's over all. And there's a fourth truth that we want to note today too, and that is God is evident to all. The definitive text in the New Testament is Romans chapter 1. Since that which may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Amen. The psalmist says the same thing, Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, the sky shows his handiwork. Day unto day unto speech, night unto night, knowledge. There is no voice or language where that witness is not heard. God is evident Now, it isn't like God woke up in the morning and said, I need to prove my existence. What can I do to prove my existence? Any more than you woke up this morning and say, how do I prove my existence? The fact of the matter is you live. And when you live, and we know more about this today than ever before, you leave a trail. Right? There's more cameras now than ever. There are trails of us everywhere. People know I've been where I probably can't even remember I was. It is a trail. And God leaves a trail. But there's a fifth truth. And the fifth truth is not everybody wants to acknowledge God. God isn't acceptable at all. John spells out, John chapter 3 says, men love darkness rather than light. People like darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. They move away from God. Or if you go over to, for example, Romans 1:21, for though they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, they didn't give him thanks, they became vain in their imagination, their foolish hearts are darkened, professing themselves to become wise, they become fools, they worship the creature more than the Creator. I know the whole quote isn't there. Or Psalm 14:3, the fool has said in his heart, there is nothing but God. More importantly, Psalm 2. Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and let us throw off their shackles. I've got to tell you today that God is not very threatening. If you continue reading the Psalm, it says, God sits in heaven and laughs and says, this day I installed my king in Zion. In the face of all of this adversity, the church has always sought to prove the existence of God. How many of you know the arguments for God's existence? There's some. Most of them are based on causality. There's what we call the cosmological argument. Every effect has a cause. The world is in fact, the world has a cause. Guess who? God. You could. The second was what we call the teleological argument. It's more popular today. It's the argument of design. Design presupposes a designer. The world exhibits design. The world must have a designer. Guess who? Oh, you're even better. The third argument is a little bit more complex, but it still works on causality. It's called the ontological argument. Nothing comes out of nothing. I have an idea of God. It didn't come from anywhere. Where did it come from? Oh, second metaphysical principle, every effect must have a sufficient cause. What would be sufficient to cause the idea of God? Only God would be sufficient to cause the idea of God. If I have the idea of God, and only God can cause the idea of God, then God must exist. Ontological argument. I kind of like it, actually. But of course, if you were smart, you look at these arguments and say, they're all based on causality. David Hume, the famed British philosopher, noted that. And he argued against causality. He said, when you see A and then B, and you begin thinking, if you see that sequence enough times, you ultimately come to the conclusion that A causes B, but you're really wrong when you start talking about causality, because you can't observe causality, which really has a psychological association in your mind. It's called association psychology. It's a little out of date. And if you're studying psychology today, you're probably not going to spend much time there. The net effect is that what we have are evidences. We don't talk about proofs for God's existence anymore. We talk about these cosmological, teleological, ontological, anthropological, and all sorts of other proofs for God's existence as evidences, because we believe that any person with an open mind who looks at this kind of argumentation might at least see some potential evidence for the reality of a living God here. But in our era, in your era and my era, the game has changed. Science has become extremely important. And when science speaks, people listen. Science has power. Science has prestige. Now, there's a lot of science going on that I have no idea about whatsoever. My lessons in science are limited. The BBC, CBC, CNN, Discovery Channel, National Geographic. And the scientists who speak on there, well, they're saying things like this: there is no objective proof for God. You don't find God in a test tube. This, by the way, shouldn't be something new. Bologna and Natasha, who are with us today, will remember clearly in their youth when Yuri Gagarin, that first Russian cosmonaut, took his little tour through the sky and said, "I didn't see God anywhere." Interesting. But there's a second thing that science says today. It doesn't just say that there's no objective proof of God. It says that there's no necessity for God. We don't need God to explain anything anymore. We don't need God to explain creation. We don't need God to explain history. We don't need God to explain anything. And in fact, when you use God to explain something, you are violating the principle of Occam's razor. Now, Occam's razor is a principle that says you never make an explanation more complex than is necessary to explain what needs to be explained. And the argument that these scientists are making is that anytime you insert God into the equation, you are making the explanation unnecessarily complex. There's a couple of things you should know about Occam. First of all, you should know that Occam actually was a priest who believed in God. Never dreamt for a moment that his razor would be used to eliminate God. So the second thing you should know about Occam, Occam was a philosopher. And Occam's principle is a philosophical principle. And it can't be, well, verified by objective analysis either. You might want to think about that. And so what we really have today, so we're talking about is the science that you and I are hearing, the TV science that comes through, is naturalism and materialism masquerading as science. That's what's really happening. It may well be true that God cannot be objectively verified. That science may well say that. We can't find or discover God, but that doesn't mean he's non-discoverable. Who gets to say science is the only method for acquiring knowledge? How would science ever prove that proposition? Yeah. And you need to understand today that there are all sorts of scientists, good scientists, high-level scientists, NASA-type scientists, Berkeley-type scientists. Oh, there's even a couple here in Waterloo, I think, scientists who actually see no contradiction between science and God's existence. Lots of scientists are Christian. Lots of scientists, if they're not Christian, at least believe in intelligent design, some kind of God being out there somewhere behind what's taking place in the universe. But the scientists who get the press are the guys like Richard Dawkins, God delusion. Or maybe you've read Bill Bryson. Have any of you ever read Bill Bryson? Bill Bryson is a very good writer and very easy to read. A short history of nearly everything. And what these two books are telling you is that, you know what, we really can explain it all without God. We don't need God anymore. He's an irrelevant concept. Just give us natural law. Just give us natural selection. Just give us gradualism. We can explain it all. Really? Really? You mean whatever was out there in the cosmos, pre-Big Bang, just chugging along, doing whatever it was doing. And then one day, kablooey. Big Bang, beginning of the universe. And that's gradual. Maybe not. Maybe somebody has the right to ask you at that point, what caused that? Or, maybe you have the right to ask at that point, who caused that? Or how do you remember when you were doing high school biology? Having fun looking through your microscope, finding new things. You're in that microbiotic stuff, looking at amoeba and paramecium and nuclein and all those other interesting little things we looked at back in early science. And then you came to that little thing that had this bacterial flagellum or something it's called, like this. It has this incredible little rotating tail. We'll put up the next thing. Okay. And that thing, like this little engine that drives this thing all over the place. Do you realize this thing can do 10,000 RPMs? Try that one in your car. My car would be dead at 10,000 RPM, probably dead at about 5.5. But I really would like to have one of these little babies. It would be a lot more fun to come to Simply Church in an S2000 Honda. But the S2000 Honda actually can't keep up with the bacteria when it comes to RPMs a minute. And here's the really, really neat thing. If you're driving your Honda S2000 and you're redlining it at 10,000 RPMs and you slap it into reverse, you will totally destroy the car. This thing can go right into reverse. No problem whatsoever. But it's just a simple little thing, just a result of gradualism. Now, someone said to me, Lou, turbines can go a lot faster than 10,000 RPMs. I know that. But who would ever call a turbine simple? That thing is simple. It's one of those little protozoan dealies. And then, you should read a book called Darwin's Little Black Box by Michael Behe, Christian scientist, not a Christian scientist, but a scientist who's a Christian. Okay? He just happens to teach at Lehigh University, which isn't bad. I've noticed the Lehigh sticker. I went there, I liked it. Nice place. He talks about irreducible complexity. Now, I don't want to even start talking about this. I'm in over my head. But evidently, for certain DNA transfers to take place, there are like 8 little proteins that need to be together in the right proportion at the right time. And if you don't have all 8, it don't happen. It's not gradualism. Irreducible complexity, but read Behe, don't listen to me on that. I'm just amazed at the fact, aren't you? Here we are today on this little thing called Earth, which probably, if anybody anywhere else in the cosmos is alive, they probably wouldn't even see it. We are lucky. Here we are on this little planet, which just happens to end up in the right kind of galaxy. A spiral galaxy. We don't just end up in the right kind of galaxy, we end up at the right place in the galaxy where we're in a non-turbulent place in that galaxy. And not just that, but we're in the right solar system, and that's the right kind of sun. It's the right sun. That has the right gases. That has the right combustion rate. And we happen to be in just the right orbit. And we happen to have just the right sized moon that exercises just the right gravitational pull on the Earth so that our axis stays in appropriate alignment. And not only that, but exercises just enough power on the earth so that our tides are appropriate, so that the rotational speed of the earth is maintained. How lucky can you get? You talk about luck. This is incredible. You know, I mean, coincidence, accident. It's kind of like this. Let's assume that you're walking on a beach. Okay? And on this beach, how many of you like walking on beaches? Yeah, walking on a beach is a nice thing. I love to see the ripple effect of the water on the sand. It's kind of the patterns that come up and everything. And one day you're walking down the beach and you come across this absolutely incredible sand castle. And you say something to this like yourself, like, you know, the waves were really good yesterday and the day before, but these waves are absolutely incredible. Look at this. Unbelievable. And sooner or later, you have to come to the place where you ask this kind of question: what is the chance of so much chance being just chance? Right? That's a good question. You don't like the question that way. Maybe you want to ask the question this way: at what point does such a volume of chance become something other than chance? Not chance, but something else. And here's the deal. If you're a materialist, you're going to have to say, never. Never, 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 never. Because as soon as you say, maybe something else, you can't be a materialist. And all of a sudden it starts dawning on you. Materialism really isn't all that scientific after all. Materialism started with its conclusion and then makes its proof. In any other realm of knowledge, this is called circular reasoning, if I recollect correctly. Maybe materialism doesn't explain everything so well. In fact, you know what it doesn't explain really very well at all? Itself. Think about it this way. If it's really true, everything's under the control of laws, in fact, natural law takes place, well then the mind, okay? The mind, everything is controlled by natural law. Then the brain or the mind, or whatever they want to call it, it's controlled by natural law too. And if the brain is controlled by natural law, then the brain thinks what it has to think, right? And if the brain thinks what it has to think, then it can't think truly or falsely. It just thinks what it thinks. You get the point? You will remember. Here's the crazy thing. If naturalism were to be true, it'd have to be false. You can never know what's true unless there's a possibility of free thought. And if it is true, there isn't a possibility of free thought. So let's do it differently. Okay, that's too much, right? So let's try this. The last time you went to the Chinese restaurant and you were sitting there saying, is it Wushu pork, is it Beijing duck, or is it Singaporean noodles? And you really wrestled on this thing, like, I don't know, look. You chose one. It was a hard decision. For me, it'd be easy. I'd be all over the noodles. Boom. No problem. But you didn't make a decision. It was what you were determined to do. Your mind isn't free. You're fooling yourself. Or what about you were looking in the mirror? He loves me. He loves me not. Or maybe if you weren't looking in a mirror, but you were thinking, I wonder how I could get her to love me. And you were wrestling with this whole thing, thinking back and forth. There's an interesting song in Russian, Какое жена? Which one? Men love this song. I don't know. She's beautiful, good and smart, rich parents, okay. Good future. Tough choice, but you didn't make a choice. Is the name Adam Lonzo ring a bell to anybody? The guy in Connecticut who went into the school with an assault rifle and mowed down child after child after child. Do you think he did it to the bad thing? I mean, after all, we live in a naturalistic world. He did what he had to do. And after all, the bad. It's just one animal killing a bunch of other animals. What's the matter? They look at me and say, "Lee, you're crazy. This is stupid." That's my point. It's absurd. Every time you think you make a choice, you didn't make a choice. And when you hold Adam Lanza responsible for killing people that he had no choice to kill, it's just what he had to do. You know there's something wrong with an ethical system. That's why the God of CBC, CNN, BBC, Discovery Channel, National Geographic is flexible. Maybe we need a little God. Just a little God. Kind of, what would you call that? An artifact. Kind of something left over. We'll have a little God out there. He can't play in a big sandbox. He doesn't make anything. He doesn't do any miracles. He doesn't mess around your life. But he's very convenient to have around. If you notice on TV, on these channels, which spend all of their time denying the existence of God, all you need is one good cyclone, one good tsunami, one good tornado, and the next thing you have politicians out there who don't believe in God all saying, God bless, God bless, God bless. Our prayers go out for you. To what? This is, my friends, the blanky God. The blanky God. Your God. This God is the crutch. Actually, this God is a crock, not just a crutch. That's what I want you to be thinking about that. This God is a creation of human beings. And all of a sudden, you recognize that this God being your creation is in fact a fulfillment of what the devil said back in Genesis chapter 3. He said to Adam and Eve, in the day you eat thereof, you will be gods. That's what's going on in our society. But I've been trying to show you this morning something. And what I'm trying to show you is that getting rid of God isn't really as simple as it looks. And it comes with disastrous consequences for your life and for the life of your society. It comes with horrific ethics or lack of ethics. It comes with horrific sets of values or no basis for values. Paul speaks about it in Romans chapter 1. He said that people didn't like to hold God in mind. And so you find 3 times this little expression, God gave them over, God gave them over. And finally, God gave them up. And he gave them up to what's described in the scripture as a reprobate mind, literally a mind which is a mind to be tested. And the mind fails the test. As I think about where we've come this morning, I think about the Apostle Paul. Things haven't changed really all that much. Paul was on Mars Hill. He has to defend his belief. He's before the Areopagus, which were kind of the philosophical police of the time in which he lived. He's been called in to give an account of what he says. Here's what Paul says. And he's giving this account to Epicureans who believe that if there is a God, he certainly wouldn't waste his time with human beings because there's such tremendous disappointment. They don't even make good sadness. Or he's with Stoics who believe, whatever is resign yourself to your life. Or he's with materialists. Paul's speaking to the kind of people that we were speaking to today. Here's what he says. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth. And he doesn't live in temples built by hands. He's not served by human hands as if he needs anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history, the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him, though he's not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we're God's offspring, we shouldn't think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked this. But now, he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. I don't know about you, but today I will say, I believe. I believe. I believe. I believe. I believe in a God who pre-exists before everything. A God who creates everything. A God who is over everything. A God who is evident everywhere. A God who rescues, who redeems, who restores. I believe in God. And I don't only believe in God. I believe in the face of this world that it makes sense to believe in this God. I hope you believe that too.